Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. Thank you for joining us. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen. We're going to go ahead and get straight into the weather this evening. Recapping a little bit of what happened yesterday with those winds in the Panhandle, especially the Juneau area. Right there in Juneau, we had gusts up to 68 miles per hour. These are actually as of yesterday evening, but it didn't look like there was anything too much higher than this after that. So peak winds looked like yesterday afternoon for the Juneau area, again, peaking around 68 miles per hour there downtown at the library. Also in the 60s at the Juneau dock, at the two Juneau docks, the AJ dock and the AML dock. Our highest winds were over the marine areas with 82 mile per hour gusts at Merriman Island and 76 miles per hour at Naked Island, 75 miles per hour at Eldred Rock. So lots of high wind gusts for the Juneau area in that high wind warning yesterday. But today we are looking at much calmer weather there. As we look at our satellite imagery for today, we have a band of clouds moving up into the southwestern portion of the state. That's associated with a weak low and a weakening front, bringing the possibility of some snow today. Over much of the mainland, though, we see very little in the way of clouds, and that is indicating high pressure over the area in addition to continuing cold temperatures. Finally, over the Panhandle, we are seeing some clouds associated with a weakening low pressure system. So some showers possible in the area today, but likely not a whole lot to speak of. So looking at our surface chart for today, we have that weakening low in the eastern and southern Bering, 991 millibars there. That's attached by an occluded front to our much stronger low pressure system that's over the eastern portion of Russia. And then we're starting to see the development of another low pressure system. This is going to be our next weather maker, currently south of the western Aleutians, and another weakening low pressure system coming up into the Panhandle, and that's what's going to be bringing that chance of snow today for the southern Panhandle, maybe some areas that haven't seen snow yet this season. But again, mostly dry and clear conditions over much of the state. As we head into tonight, we see that low that was south of the western Aleutians strengthening rapidly tonight down to 978 millibars as it approaches the eastern Aleutians, bringing rain and snow with it. We'll also have that low pressure starting to dissipate over the southwestern portion of the state with some snow showers, and then also our low for the Panhandle dissipating as well, with the potential for some additional snow showers along coastal portions of the Panhandle. But again, for much of the state, the mainland and interior as well as the North Slope looks like dry and clear conditions tonight. For Thursday, we have that low in the Bering moving just north of the Aleutians and strengthening even further to 964 millibars, so packing quite a punch with it. We'll see strong winds along the Aleutians as well as certainly very strong winds over the Bering Sea itself. Also pushing some rain and snow showers into the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. We have a weak low developing in the Gulf, and that is going to be bringing some rain and snow to the immediate Gulf Coast, but not making it very far inland. And then finally, we have some breezy conditions along the Chukchi Sea coast. That is going to be bringing some freezing spray concerns across the Chukchi Sea. So if you have any plans to be traveling in the Chukchi Sea for Thursday, keep in mind that threat for freezing spray. Taking a look ahead into Friday, we have our low in the Bering finally weakening down up to 974 millibars. Another low developing along its occluded front at 981 millibars just south of the Alaska Peninsula for Friday. So those are both going to be bringing some potential for heavy rain to the immediate northern Gulf Coast, including Kodiak Island and the southern coast portions of the Kenai Peninsula. Also some snow, although not as heavy, to the southwestern portion of the state, and some windy conditions along with it. Taking a look at temperatures for Thursday morning, we have, again, negative teens mostly for the interior, with some temperatures down into the negative 20s. Quite a lot warmer along the north slope, as we've seen some warmer conditions up there with temperatures positive, even up into the positive teens. Temperatures still relatively cold for South Central, about 6 degrees at Anchorage, 2 degrees at Talkeetna, and we're looking at teens and 20s for the Panhandle. High temperatures on Thursday, almost getting into the positives for some places in the interior, with 1 degree for Fairbanks on Thursday. Still warmer for the north slope into the positive teens. Warmer again for the southwestern portion of the state as well, with some temperatures along the coast even getting above freezing. As we look ahead into Friday morning, we are looking at very similar conditions across the interior to what we're looking at Thursday morning. So still negative teens to some negative 20s. We're seeing warming though across the southern third of the state from south central to southwest, where we'll see that low pressure system bringing some warmer air up. So lows of only in the teens for Anchorage and the 20s for southwestern portions of the state. And finally on Friday afternoon, again, we'll see that warming trend across the southern tier. So 20s and 30s for south central, 30s and even some 40s for southwestern portion of the state, while the interior remains cold, still 1 degree at Fairbanks, and even some highs in the negatives across the interior portion of the state.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Now for a look at your aviation forecast. Flying weather for Thursday morning looks like quite a lot of IFR for the southwestern portion of the state, as well as some of the Aleutians. Also some IFR conditions in the Yukon Flats, but mostly VFR over the mainland, with mostly MVFR over the Aleutians. Also some MVFR for the Panhandle for Thursday morning. Thursday afternoon, we see that IFR and MVFR spread a little bit further inland over the southwestern portion of the area. So MVFR spreading all the way from the southern Chukchi Sea down through southwestern Alaska and into the northern Gulf out into Kodiak Island, with some IFR conditions for the northern Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island itself. Also some IFR conditions for the southern Panhandle and over the Aleutians and southern Alaska Peninsula, with our next low pressure system tracking into the area. For Friday morning, we'll see IFR continuing across portions of the Alaska Peninsula and stretching up the Bering coast of the southwestern portion of the state. Also IFR conditions returning to the Yukon Flats area and continuing over the southern Panhandle. For Friday afternoon, improvement across the interior to MVFR, but mostly VFR, but IFR continuing across southwestern coastal portions of the state, as well as portions of the southern Panhandle. Pass conditions on Thursday, Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass both expected to be VFR conditions. Lake Clark and Merrill Passes both VFR in the morning, but deteriorating to MVFR conditions on Thursday afternoon. VFR conditions at both Rainy Pass and Windy Pass, as well as VFR at Isabel Pass. Mentasta Pass expected to be MVFR in the morning, but improving to VFR on Thursday afternoon. Tanita Pass VFR on Thursday. Portage Pass starting the day VFR on Thursday, but going to MVFR Thursday afternoon. And finally, Chilkoot and White Passes both expected to be VFR on Thursday. Taking a look at freezing levels, we have our surface freezing level across the coast of pretty much the entire southern half of the state, with a little bit of warm air coming up into the northern Gulf with 2,000-foot freezing levels, but those staying south of the state at this point. For icing on Thursday, we have quite a lot of isolated moderate icing across the southern half of the state, including the Aleutians and the Panhandle. So across the southwestern portion of the state, we'll have isolated moderate icing above 2,000 feet and below about 6,000 feet. Out over the Aleutians, isolated moderate icing above about 4,000 feet, and also isolated moderate icing above 4,000 feet for the Panhandle on Thursday. Jet stream winds for Thursday, we have one low pressure system over near the eastern coast of Russia. We've got our main jet well south of that, still south of the Aleutians, just like we saw for today, with peaking winds about 160 knots, so a strong jet there out of the northwest. Again, that's going to stay south of the Aleutians. A little bit of a secondary jet out of the south, stretching from southwestern Alaska up into eastern Russia, 80 to 90 knots for that secondary jet. At 9,000 feet, we are looking at that same low pressure system over the eastern portion of Russia with high pressure in command over the northern part of Alaska. Our main winds are going to be down near that developing low pressure system in the Aleutians, with about 75 knots peaking out of the west and southwest on the eastern side of that low. So definitely be aware of these winds if you have any plans to fly in the area of the eastern Aleutians and southern Alaska Peninsula on Thursday. Same story at 3,000 feet. We see that low pressure system in the Aleutians a little bit more well defined at this level. Still very strong winds peaking about 75 knots out of the west and southwest over the eastern Aleutians. Actually, that peak just south of the Aleutians themselves, with winds more along the lines of about 60 knots over the Aleutian Islands. Also, another peak out of the south over the northwestern portion of the state, about 55 knots. So another area to keep an eye on if you have plans to fly on Thursday. Finally, turbulence on Thursday in that same area over the eastern Aleutians and southern Alaska Peninsula. We do have some isolated severe turbulence possible below 4,000 feet associated with that low pressure system. Also below 4,000 feet for much of the west coast of the state, and a significant depth of the air below 12,000 feet, some icing across the Panhandle.
We can't just put the fires out because we can't put them out. We've tried that now for a century and it doesn't work. It just makes the next one worse.
You may see a place like this and think, total devastation. And it's not your fault for thinking that.
But that depiction is, as we've learned from countless experts over the last 2 weeks, not the whole story, and not how you should think about wildfires.
The truth is, there are lots of types of habitats out west, and fire affects them all in unique ways. So it's important to start thinking about the big picture with wildland fires. So let's first rewind. To help us understand what's going on out west, Rob and I started calling up the experts, and what we found was that the story of fire, particularly in the west, is complex. So to understand it, we planned a road trip.
Road trip time!
The goal of our road trip was to see as many forests as we could and meet experts around the region to help us understand the role fire plays out here. First destination was to find the forest burned by the now famous Great Fires of 1910. And at the heart of what is known as the Big Blow-Up, the logical first place to stop, the city of Wallace.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
How's the day going?
Good. Haley and I are in this cute town of Wallace, Idaho, which was completely destroyed by the 1910 fires. You can see how much damage this fire actually did. Let's send up the drone and see what the surroundings look like now. What we found was a small town surrounded by a dense forest, with every single tree just over 100 years old.
So everything we see behind us now, that's all new growth since 1910.
And to help us put these historic fires and the forests around Wallace in perspective, we met up with historian Diane Smith.
This is Wallace, and here are your fires.
All of this
is the 1910 fires?
This is not that unusual. The fact is, it just was at a time in our development as a country. We noticed it, we paid attention to it, and we got the national attention for it.
Right. As it turns out, these fires helped reinforce the idea at the time that every fire needed to be suppressed at all costs. And this suppression for so long has led to new problems, namely thick forests full of fuel. But don't just take my word for it. Let me show you the difference.
Notice how different this place is than this one that has been thinned out quite heavily in the past, or like an area like this that's been burnt quite frequently.
In fact, both of these areas show how many forests would have looked in the past under regular burns. The dead and low-growing material gets consumed easily by fire, very much unlike this forest, which has had fire suppression for over 100 years and could lead to a high-intensity fire.
And all of this dry, dead material, that's problematic.
So we went looking for a big fire and just followed the smoke.
Oh gosh, a huge crown fire. I gotta get this.
These high-intensity fires aren't great because in many forests they kill all the trees over a large area, even in forests that used to be very resistant to frequent fires. And nobody knows that better than the people that work in this particular forest.
There's green coming back, and I guess I've gotten somewhat used to it, and I still have hope that the entire Sierra Nevadas won't look like this, that we can maybe get ahead of it. So the fires nowadays can move from the surface right into the tree canopies really easily, where in the past, fires would have kept trees pruned, they would have kept fuel densities low, and so now you end up with a lot more high severity fires in the West than had a fire regime kept under its historic recurrence. This to me is more a lesson of fire exclusion and keeping fire out of the system. If we're keeping it out of when it would burn with a beneficial effect, it will burn, and the probability of it burning at an unbeneficial state is higher.
So again, this is where it's complicated. We thought if only we could stop the fires, we'd win the fight. But the fires like the King Fire here show that stopping the fires only made it worse. Add that to the fact that we're living closer than ever to these wild lands. So to help us understand the wildland-urban interface, we met up with CAL FIRE. And as we were pulling up to this neighborhood, one of the residents quickly came out to tell us about the latest fire.
Yeah, our biggest fear is fire. It was very scary. I mean, everybody was honking and get out, and you know, there's a fire.
This is the risk across California. The response piece alone isn't going to solve this challenge if the homeowners aren't organized.
Because we're all in the same boat. We're one match away from everybody losing everything. It's a real fear.
Literally, we could have that fire spread up in here within a matter of seconds.
Wow.
California is going to have fires. We're not going to stop all the fires in California, so we have to have an infrastructure that's fire resistant. We need to work on policies that help us engage in active management of our forest. That's using prescribed fire as a tool. It's all the things in the toolbox. It's a combination of managing our forest and a combination of protecting our communities that are in it.
If it wasn't complicated enough, this made it very clear that you can't just let the fires burn whenever they start. The forests need to be managed to help mitigate the risk to us. But using fire seems to be one of the keys to making things safer, and knowing the science behind fire is always key to implementing good management.
Fire Sciences Lab, right over here.
So we made a stop at the Missoula Fire Lab to try to understand what we know about fire.
You see the flames at the very top and how they're sticking to the slope?
They really are. Everybody's laying down.
They're laying down. Well, that's flame attachment. Actually a very difficult thing to understand.
Here at the Fire Lab, the scientists study the basics of fire. Understanding the complexities here helps firefighters and forest managers in the field better predict and fight wildland fires.
Fires are inevitable. The only choices that we really have is what kind of fire to have and when do we want it. And that's it. Almost? Ready. You're ready. Jason's ready.
Mark's team is prepping to light a huge bed of precisely cut cardboard.
You're not going to be in any danger. So when the lights go out, don't move. Gasoline.
This is one of many experiments they'll run to understand the physics of fire, how it moves, how it spreads, and all of this measured by precise scientific instruments and high-speed cameras. tens of thousands of pieces of cardboard up in flames in mere seconds. The ongoing research will help us better understand fire with the ultimate goal that we can live better with it. But can we do that? There is one forest we knew of that seems to have figured out this coexistence with fire, a place where fires burn all summer, every summer. It's part of their way of life and a mentality we wanted to know about.
And here we went out with our guides Frank Lake and Steve Valentine, who work with the local U.S. Forest Service and tribe to help keep a healthy forest.
This is perfect. The fire's basically come through and cleared out the understory, and all that's left are the trees.
Yeah, it's black and it's charred, and you just see a few of the earliest sprouts, but you come back in here a year, it's going to be alive again.
And to many, this may seem destroyed, but they view it differently here.
That fire's medicine, because it's not if it comes, it's when it comes. We need fire, and fire needs us.
You see, fire needs people to remind us how important fire is to the ecosystem. Frank and Steve's ancestors have been burning this forest for millennia. It's now part of what makes the forest special. They just want to make sure that it's not forgotten.
Basically, what you leave behind is what's important.
When they say this is your foods and your medicines, your sacred places, your springs, your water, that's essential, that's who we are as people. We have to learn to live with fire. We have to learn to respect fire. We have to maintain that security. That's why I do what I do.
Haley and I have learned a lot on our journey. We've learned that fire is complicated, and it's not as black and white as we make it out to be, and it is an integral part of our forests. They've had fire running through them for thousands of years, and they will continue to have fire in them in the future. And we can't always put the fires out. We have to decide what kind of fires to live with. And that is why we need to work with these fire crews from around the country. We also need a public who understands the importance of fire on the landscape. A healthy forest, you see, is a forest that lives with fire.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at your marine forecast, starting with the sea ice edge. We've had some warmer temperatures up near the Chukchi Sea, and that has caused some of the ice in the Chukchi to retreat at this point. We're also looking for a stormy period of a number of days through the weekend in the Bering Sea, so some of that lower concentration ice that we're seeing along the coast is likely to break up and melt over the next few days through the weekend. Taking a look at our marine conditions for the southeastern portion of the state on Thursday, we're looking at winds for the Gulf ranging from 15 to 25 knots, generally out of the east and southeast, with seas in the 5 to 7 foot range. For the inside waterways, winds a little bit stronger, especially north in the Lynn Canal area, 35 knots out of the north and about 7 foot seas there, decreasing as we head further south to about 15 knots out of the southeast, with 4 foot seas for the southern inside waterways. For Friday, we'll see those winds in the inside waterways finally decrease, especially up in the Lynn Canal area. So just 15 knots out of the north with 3 foot seas there. Winds increasing just a little bit, especially in the northern Gulf, still out of the east, but about 30 knots with 8 foot seas, decreasing in winds as we head farther south in the Gulf to about 20 knots out of the east. Thursday for South Central, winds out of the east 20 to 35 knots with those strongest winds out of the east near the Barrens, and seas 6 to 8 feet for the Gulf, also 6 to 8 feet for Cook Inlet, so a little bit elevated there. As we head into Friday, a fairly significant shift as we get strengthening winds ahead of our next system, 40 to even 55 knots of wind out of the east, that 55 knots strongest near the Barrens. So keep an eye out for these winds if you have any plans to head out on Friday for recreational boats. Certainly a good time to reconsider your plans with storm force winds expected in the Gulf on Friday. Taking a look at the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas for Thursday, this is going to be getting that system before the Gulf is. So we're seeing winds starting to pick up on Thursday, especially for the southern portion of the peninsula. 45 knots out of the south and southeast, so plenty of wind there. Decreasing fairly quickly as we head north, though, only 15 knots out of the east as we get up to about Kodiak Island. And then on Friday, the strongest winds will be north, so 45 to even 50 knots out of the east and southeast for Friday, with seas as high as about 19 or 20 feet. For the Aleutians, they're getting the brunt of this storm on Thursday, so 50 to 55 knot winds out of the south and west for those eastern Aleutians on Thursday. Seas as high as about 27 feet. Could see some 30-foot seas in the area with that level of winds. A little bit less as we head out to the western Aleutians, 17 to 19-foot seas, about 30 knots of wind out of the west. And then Friday, things calm down a little bit, although calm is certainly not quite the right word when we're still looking at 30 to 40 knots of wind out of the west. Seas coming down just a little bit, anywhere from about 15 to 25 feet across the Aleutians. For Thursday along the west coast, we're looking at southeast and east winds, 25 to about 30 knots, although we do have stronger winds ahead of that system down near the Pribilofs, about 45 knots out of the east. Also, our highest seas there about 17 feet. And heading into Friday, we'll see winds come up further north in the Bering, so 30 to about 40 knots out of the east in general, although we do have some southwest flow down near the Pribilofs. Seas increasing as well, 7 feet in Norton Sound, about 13 to 16 feet for the rest of the Bering. Thursday for the Arctic coast, 5 to 15 knots, so fairly light winds across the north slope, increasing in the Chukchi Sea, 20 to 30 knots offshore out of the east. And on Friday, we'll see winds increasing a bit along the north slope, 15 knots, but decreasing in the Chukchi, 15 to 25 knots. Recapping our outlook for tonight, we've got some snow showers in the Panhandle, and our next strong low pressure system strengthening even more as it crosses the Aleutians tonight and comes up into the Bering, bringing those strong winds and certainly high seas. Thanks so much for watching Alaska TV Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.